Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. If you're listening to Carving It Up Podcast, you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and we are also on Anchor. What a night last night. Super Bowl 55. Did not see a blowout coming. The GOAT has a seventh ring. The defending champs went down in blowout fashion. We've got all kinds of stuff, all Super Bowl related to talk about. Obviously, I'm going to react to the game in just a second. I'm also going to talk about Tom Brady. What does the seventh ring mean for him? Specifically, where does it put him amongst the greatest athletes in the history of American team sports? Also, the Chiefs offense really struggled yesterday. I'll detail why that was. Also, the Weeknd had an incredible halftime show. I'll discuss that later on the show. And who the losers were outside of the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, last night. And at the end of the show, I'm going to offer my little soliloquy, if you will, for why y'all ain't got no business. None of us have any business hating Tom Brady. But first, got to talk about the game. It was just this little game called the Super Bowl, right? Well, I got to gloat today. I do. I think I deserve, every dog has his day, as the saying goes. And today's my day. Because on this show, September 10th, 2020, did a special Carving It Up episode. It ended up being like an hour and a half long. Had a Chad from A Guy and a Girl Talk Sports in the show. Talked for about 30 minutes. It was a great show. But end of the show, I predicted, sorry, my voice cracked there. End of the show, I predicted who would win each division. And by the way, this week, not on today's show, but on either Thursday or Friday, probably Thursday, I'm going to look over my preseason predictions and where I thought each team would be at this point when the season was over, and compare them to where they actually, what actually happened. So that should be pretty cool because I was dead right on some, I was dead wrong on others. So that should be great. But I got to discuss this because before the year started, I said, you know what? It was a weird off season, unlike any we've ever seen. In large part, if not only because of COVID, right? And you're not able to do OTAs and training camps is much more different than usual. Teams are doing training camp at their practice facilities, and teams couldn't work out with each other in the offseason because of COVID. And so I looked at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and I said, okay, we knew they had a great receiving core. We knew that they had a good offensive line. They got better in the draft. Tristan Wirfs, who I said before the draft even started, best offensive lineman in the draft by far. Tampa Bay stole him at pick number 13, I believe. But they had a great defense. They finished top 5 in the NFL defensively over the last 6 games of 2019. And again, this is all with the quarterback and Jameis Winston, who threw 30 interceptions. He threw 30 touchdowns, but he had 30 interceptions and 35 total turnovers. He had 5 fumbles. And so you had Tom Brady to the mix. And everybody's like, oh, Tom's done. And I said, nope, he needs weapons. That's what he did not have in New England, at least the last year. And I probably argue the last 2 years in New England. He did not have any weapons whatsoever. And somehow, some way, 2018, he won his 6th Super Bowl and his final Super Bowl in New England. But he goes to Tampa. I say, you know what? It's his first year there. It was a weird offseason, but there is no way the Bucs are going to miss the playoffs. So I had them going 11-5. I had the Saints winning the division. Bucs at 11-5 as the 5th seed. Well, I was right on that. I had the Bucs winning their first road wildcard game. Not like that's a bold prediction or anything, so I'm not going to gloat too much about that, which of course they did. The Bucs beat the Washington football team in the wildcard round. And then the divisional round, I said this again, March 10th, 5 months ago. I said the Buccaneers would play the New Orleans Saints and in the divisional round in the Superdome, and they did. And I picked Tampa Bay to win before the year started, and they did. They won a few weeks ago. And they go to the NFC Championship game. I did not have them playing Green Bay. I had them playing Dallas, so that was way off. But they went on the road, NFC Championship game. They won that. And they played the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, which I predicted before the year started. We were going to get Kansas City, Tampa Bay. And so, again, last year, I to be frank, I sucked in my predictions last year in the playoffs. And over the last 9 years, I've not been good at picking Super Bowls. Going into the Super Bowl is 1-7. I'm now 2-7, and I feel like I'm on top of the world, right? But as far as the game, here's what happened. Is you had a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that played this same Kansas City Chiefs team in that same stadium, Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay, Florida. And on November 29th, week 12 of the NFL season. Okay, Tampa Bay's on a roll. Okay, Kansas City's on a roll. Tampa Bay is not playing the best. They just come off a loss to the LA Rams at home on Monday Night Football. They're having trouble offensively, defensively. They're looking a little shaky, not bad, but shaky. And they play the best quarterback in the world, the best offense in the world. And it looks like it in the first quarter. Kansas City went up 17-0, and Tyreek Hill had over 200 receiving yards in the first quarter. From that point on, Tampa Bay outscored Kansas City 24-10. But Kansas City, of course, won the football game 27-24. And so 2 months later, 2.5 months later, Tampa Bay said, you know what? Kansas City is missing both tackles due to injury. We've got Jason Pierre-Paul. We've got Shaq Barrett, who, by the way, Shaq Barrett was amazing against Green Bay in the NFC Championship game. His stats don't show it. He was unbelievable last night. I mean, constantly getting pressure on Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he was a game wrecker. And so there's that. And at the end of the day, Tampa Bay said, you know what? If we send the blitz like we did in week 12, Tyreek Hill is going to have a field day. He's going to throw up deuces. He's going to do more backflips in the end zone. And it's going to be a long day for us. And so they said, you know what? We're going to trust the strength of our defense, and that's our pass rush. And listen, Tampa Bay's got a lot of strength in their defense. Their pass rush is amazing. Their two linebackers, David and Devin White. Devin White, by the way, my goodness, he's unbelievable. I mean, he's as good as any linebacker coming into the league as we've seen in a long time. There's certainly Levante David, Devin White, best linebacker duo in the NFL, easily. I'm not being a prisoner of the moment. They are the best linebacking duo in the NFL. I challenge anybody to find one better. And their secondary is amazing. Winfield and Murphy Bunting, always at the right place at the right time. They've got some great players on that side of the ball defensively. And they said, you know what? We're going to make Kansas City, and I heard some people talking about this, and I'll give them credit for it, I heard people throughout the week saying, it's pick your poison, right, with Kansas City. And we talked about it like, what are you going to do? Because if you play man, if you blitz, Tyreek Hill's going to kill you. So is Sammy Watkins. So is Mecole Hardman. But if you play zone, Travis Kelce's going to eat you alive. And they said, you know what? We're going to go with playing zone coverage, and we're going to gamble that Kansas City cannot sustain a long drive, which Kansas City had some pretty good drives, I thought, throughout the game, but they could not finish them. Tampa Bay made the plays that they needed to. But I think to me, the key point in this game, easily, and there was a lot of points in the game, that people want to refer to. Here's what it was for me. Okay, so Kansas City kicks the field goal with under a minute left in the game, right? It's 14-6 Tampa Bay, and remember, Kansas City gets the ball to start the second half. And so they kick off to Tampa Bay, and I'm thinking, okay, Tampa Bay is going to be aggressive here, going to try and get points, maybe get a field goal from Ryan Suckup, make this a 17-6 ball game. Kansas City goes into the locker room down 2 scores. And they run the ball with Leonard Fournette. Again, we got under a minute left. Tampa Bay has a single timeout. So still time, but Tampa Bay, for some reason or another, plays it conservative, and they run the ball. And Kansas City uses a timeout, and I'm thinking, by the way, I'm not second guessing this. You can check my Twitter at Carving It Up Pod. As I tweeted, I don't know, Andy Reid. I'm not giving them free time, especially they only have one timeout now. I'm not giving them free time for them to rethink this. And if they get a couple first downs, you're in trouble. What did we see 2 weeks ago with this same Tampa Bay team against the Green Bay Packers at the end of the half? Okay, Green Bay, obviously, Aaron Rodgers had thrown an interception. They use a timeout, the Packers do, and Tampa Bay's looking at it like, you know what, let's go for it on 4th down. They convert the 4th down, very next play, bomb to Scotty Miller down the left sideline. It was terrible coverage by Kevin King, but that's another story for another day. But the point is, Tampa Bay loves to be aggressive at the end of the half. That's what they do. All great teams do that. Is at the end of quarters, at the end of halves, they want to hit you with one big punch to carry that momentum into the next quarter or into the next half. That's what great teams do. And this, it's what Tampa Bay likes to do. And so we see Andy Reid use one timeout, and I'm like, I understand you want points. I get it. And you have the most explosive offensive league. I understand. But at this point, Tampa Bay was content going up into the locker room up 14-6. But Kansas City apparently want to get more points, and I get it. But then they use the second timeout. Like, if they had sacked Brady on the second down play and it's like 3rd and 15, I agree with using a second timeout. But it was 3rd and 2. I mean, that's nothing. 3rd and 2 for the greatest quarterback ever and all the weapons he has, that's nothing. And of course, they convert on 3rd and 2. Everybody's complaining about the refs. Now, I didn't like the pass interference play on Tyrann Mathieu. He and Mike Evans, getting tangled in the end zone. I didn't like that pass interference call at all. But that was the only call in the game against Kansas City that I disagreed with. Because like the pass interference that got him down inside into the red zone on Mike Evans, I think Breeland was covering, Rashad Breeland. That was clearly pass interference. I don't know. People on Twitter and social media in general just saying, you barely touched him. We tripped him. The refs, they will call that every single time. That's textbook. You trip a receiver, they are always going to call it pass interference or incidental contact. They could call that as well. But they called it pass interference. I agree with the call. Because, listen, that's a touchdown if he doesn't trip him, right? And Tampa Bay takes advantage of Kansas City's mistakes. And I'm looking at the stat sheet, and at the end of the day, and how many times did we see this when Tom Brady was with the New England Patriots, right? Is if you make a mistake, if you turn the football over, or you commit crucial penalties, New England always took advantage. That's what great teams do. Great teams take advantage of your mistakes. And I'm looking at it here. Tampa Bay had 4 penalties for 39 yards. And I don't remember any of them. They might have had a false start, right? Kansas City had 11 penalties for 120 yards. And as great of a coach as Andy Reid is, and I'm not going to, I always say that the day after the Super Bowl, the winning quarterback and coach is the greatest ever, which Brady is the greatest quarterback ever, obviously. But just in general, the winning quarterback and coach is the greatest ever, and the losing quarterback and coach, they suck and they're terrible. They're going to go 0-16 next year, right? I mean, it is overreaction Monday on steroids. But this has been the biggest criticism for the last 15 years with Andy Reid when he was in Philadelphia and now that he's in Kansas City, is he is an offensive genius. But man, his teams are never disciplined. They always struggle with bad penalties. They were an offsides away. D Ford was offsides in that 2018 AFC Championship game. Chiefs are playing the Patriots. Chiefs had the lead with under a minute left. And D Ford is off. Brady threw an interception and went off of Gronk's hands. Kansas City intercepted the ball. We're going to the Super Bowl. No, D Ford was offsides. Don't put yourself in those positions because Brady will always take advantage of that. That's what he's done his entire career, and that's what he did at the end of the half yesterday. And so that, to me, that was a turning point in the game. They scored the touchdown. They're up 21-6, and the game never felt the same after that. It never felt the same after that. I didn't rule out Kansas City coming back because we've seen, again, how explosive they are. They've been down big in games and coming back and just blitzing people, right? But this is a whole different monster, man. Tom Brady in Super Bowl is a different beast. Different beast. And congrats to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Congrats to my cousin, who has been a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan for a long time. He was a huge fan back when they won that Super Bowl in 2002 when they had that incredible defense. John Lynch, who's in the Hall of Fame, by the way. Congrats to John Lynch. He deserves to be there. John Lynch, Derek Brooks had a pick 6 in that game. This is shown on the highlight reels a lot. Derek Brooks was an amazing player. Warren Sapp, great defense back in 2002. He was a big fan back then. He's a big fan now. Congrats to him. I know he's probably pretty excited right now. So, let's transition to Tom Brady. You know, after Brady won that Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons, the infamous 28-3 comeback, that cemented him as the greatest quarterback ever. I mean, there was no, because he had more rings than Montana. He tied Montana in Super Bowl MVPs. And let's be honest, that was, I know it wasn't technically, as far as points-wise, the greatest comeback in NFL history. I believe Frank Reich, the current head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, he was in Buffalo. I don't remember what year it was. It might have been 1991. It was in the 90s. They were playing the Houston Oilers. They came back from a 32-point deficit, something crazy, in a playoff game. So that technically, points-wise, was the greatest comeback ever. But as far as the magnitude, I mean, we're talking about the Super Bowl. No team in Super Bowl history had ever come back from more than a 10-point deficit. Brady came back from 25 4 years ago against the Falcons. And so that cemented him as the greatest quarterback ever. But there was still the debate, is he the greatest NFL player ever? Which at the time, I thought so. But it was still up for debate. And 2 years later, although he's not good in that Super Bowl against the Rams, they win that Super Bowl against the LA Rams. He wins his 6th ring. No player had ever done that. The record had been 5. Charles Haley. Brady broke that record 2 years ago when they beat the Rams. And so that cemented him past, I believe, LT and Lawrence Taylor, of course, and Jerry Rice. To me, Brady, Jerry Rice, and LT were the 3 greatest football players who ever lived. And that 6th Super Bowl ring, helped Tom Brady surpass those 2. Yesterday, I should say, he won his 7th Super Bowl ring, which is crazy. 7 rings. I mean, think about that. And you know what's scary? Before I get into Brady's legacy real quick, here's what's scary about Tampa Bay. Here's what's scary. They're going to be better next year. They're going to get a normal offseason Lord forbid COVID gets, I know the cases are going down, but, Lord forbid COVID just goes rampant in the next few months. But they should be able to get a normal offseason, right? OTAs, normal training camp. And by the way, they have that team chemistry. Byron Leftwich called an unbelievable game yesterday. By the way, Todd Bowles, I'm sorry, I'm getting off track with Brady, but I have to say this. Todd Bowles, it is a crime. It's a crime that Eric Bieniemy doesn't have a job, no question. But Todd Bowles called one of the greatest defensive Super Bowls we've ever seen. I thought Belichick a couple of years ago against the Rams in that Super Bowl, because the Rams, they have been struggling they've been struggling as an offense, but man, Belichick shut them down 2 years ago. But we're talking about Kansas City. We're talking about one of the greatest offenses we've ever seen, ever. And Todd Bowles completely shut them down. Across the board. He called a heck of a game last night. But back to Brady. Brady wins his 7th ring. And so the debate for greatest quarterback ever, that ended 4 years ago. Okay, that debate, the debate for quarterbacks now, who's the 2nd greatest ever? I think it's Joe Montana. I think it's Brady, Montana, Peyton Manning, John Elway, and then it's kind of a toss-up between Marino and guys like that. I'd probably put Dan Marino in that 5 position. He was an amazing quarterback. But Tom's the GOAT quarterback. No question about it. No debate. He's the greatest NFL player ever. That got cemented 2 years ago. No question, no debate. Now he's in the conversation. I talked about this Friday. Let's look at the greatest American athletes of all time. Okay? So let's start with a guy like Babe Ruth, right? A lot of people consider the greatest baseball player of all time. Well, no disrespect to the Babe, but they both have the same number of championships. Babe Ruth won 7 World Series. Tom Brady has now won 7 Super Bowls. Babe played a sport that, let's be honest, does not take as much athletic ability, and certainly at that time, back in the 20s and 30s, did not even come close to taking as much athletic ability as we do almost 100 years later, right? You see in the Super Bowl just 50 years ago, Lynn Dawson, the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, was smoking a cigarette on the sideline at halftime. So, nutrition and how guys take care of their bodies, that's changed drastically. So I'm not going to, hold that against Babe. It was a, very different time back then as far as, athletes being in shape. But I see it, and both Brady and Babe Ruth have same number of championships. Both have great records. Both were amazing in the playoffs. Both have iconic playoff moments. And I say Brady did it at a time where and I know we're comparing sports here, but Brady did it at a time where it's way more difficult to win championships. I mean, Bill Russell back in the 60s won 11 championships. 50, 60, 70. He won 11 championships, right? And no disrespect to the great Bill Russell, the ultimate champion. But there was only 8 teams in the NBA back then. And so you look at, by the way, Babe Ruth and I know this, the rule back then, you could only win 1 MVP in your career. But Babe Ruth, 1 MVP, Tom Brady, 4 regular season MVPs. And so now let's look at a guy like, or let's look at somebody like a woman like Serena Williams, right? Greatest tennis player ever, no debate. These last few years, she's still great, but these last few years she's tailed off a little bit, right? Same thing with Tiger Woods. Great. And both Serena and Tiger in their primes, dominant. Nobody was beating them. But in their last few years, due to injuries, I know Serena had a health scare a few years ago, and thank God she's okay from that. But due to circumstances with their health, they tailed off, right? You look at Michael Jordan, who I consider the greatest basketball player ever. Although I do think if LeBron wins this championship this year, which I think he will, it's a conversation now. But at this point, February 8th, 2021, Jordan's the greatest basketball player of all time. We compared Jordan and Brady. Now, Brady last night passed Jordan in rings. Jordan, of course, went 6-0. Brady has won his 7th Super Bowl ring. But look at this. Michael Jordan plays in a sport that is built for dynasties because you get the same schedule every year. Let's be honest, outside of the first 5, 6, 7, 8 draft picks, they're your outliers. But outside of the first 8 draft picks, guys, teams are just kind of hoping, crossing their fingers that whoever they draft turns out to be a star player, right? I mean, it's been that way in the NBA for quite a long time, and certainly in these last 5 years or so. And so you look at that. You look at the fact that in the East, I know you had the Knicks, you had the Pacers, you had the bad boy Pistons at the beginning of the Bulls dynasty, but those teams, when the Bulls were on, man, those teams did not have a prayer's chance at stopping Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Phil Jackson, and that entire Chicago Bulls squad. And so you look at Tom Brady. The NFL is specifically, it is intentionally designed for us to not have dynasties. Okay? Because you're the worst team in the NFL, you get the number 1 pick. And that, of course, that's the case in the NBA. But in the NFL, you see guys in the 4th, 5th, Tom Brady, 6th round. Antonio Brown, by the way, caught a touchdown yesterday, 6th round. A few years ago, this MVP of the Super Bowl, Julian Edelman, 7th round, and he's a quarterback. I mean, the football talent around America is incredible. You can find talent at any school pretty much. Carson Wentz, went to North Dakota State. Steve McNair went to a small school. So, it doesn't matter. If you got talent, you can be in the NFL, right? And so you look at that, and you look at the fact that if you're first place in your division, you win your division, you host a playoff game. The next season, you play every other team in your conference that also won their division, right? It's called first place schedules. For example, the Washington football team won the NFC East. Let's just use that as an example. The Washington football team won the NFC East. So they're going to play a first place schedule next year. They're going to play the Saints. They're going to play the Packers. And they're going to play, what's the division I'm missing? The Seahawks. Okay, because all 4 of those teams won their division. They're going to play each other. Okay, and so you look at that, and yet and still, Brady has more rings than Jordan. By the way, Michael Jordan went to a second team with the Washington Wizards, and he was good. He averaged 20 points a game. He was really good. But the Wizards never even got to the playoffs. Okay? The Wizards never even got to the playoffs. Tom Brady, in his first season, in a pandemic-filled season, won the Super Bowl. In a sport that it is way more difficult. It's way more difficult to win a Super Bowl than it is to win an NBA Finals. It just is. That's just the facts of the situation. Like the NBA is built for dynasties. The NFL is not. And yet and still, Tom is, as he said before, still here. It's incredible. And I don't know if he's the greatest athlete ever. I think he has passed Jordan. If you're asking me, now team sports, yeah, Tom Brady's the greatest player in the history of team sports. You look at his accomplishments, you look at longevity, you look at the fact that the man is 43 years old and still playing at an elite level. All those components, team sports, absolutely. Now at this point, he's looking at, and it's tough to judge individual sports and team sports. It's really difficult. If you ask me, who I think the greatest, American athlete period is, I think it's Michael Phelps. I think it's absolutely Michael Phelps. Of course, the greatest Olympian ever. The man won. Let's just sit back and listen to this. He's won 20 plus gold medals in the Olympics. Beijing, I believe he won 10. He won like double. It was something crazy. It was like 10 gold medals in Beijing. So I think Michael Phelps is the greatest American athlete ever. But Tom Brady has officially cemented himself as the greatest American team sport athlete ever. Ever. Babe Ruth, same amount of championships, not as many MVPs. Longevity, Okay, you look at Jordan on a second team. They never even made the playoffs. And Michael Jordan, as great as he was, he needed Phil Jackson. He needed Scottie Pippen. And that's not a knock on Jordan even. Okay, because once he got those guys, it was game over, right? Tom Brady just needs good receivers, formidable defense, and he's going to go take you to the Super Bowl. It's incredible. And listen, like I said, I'm going to go into a little bit of I wouldn't even call it a rant. I'd just call it an explanation as to why nobody has any business hating on Tom Brady at this point. So I'll get to that later in the show. So let's talk about Kansas City. Of course, nobody saw that coming. You know, people pick Tampa Bay. I picked Tampa Bay. Nobody saw. If you told me that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to score 9 points and not score a touchdown in the Super Bowl, I would have said, "Get out of my face! You're crazy." Okay, because it just wasn't going to happen. We see the runs that this team gets on. We saw last year in the Super Bowl. It looks like all hope is lost. It's 21-0, or 21-10 against the San Francisco 49ers. And in the last 6 minutes of the game, Kansas City scores 3 touchdowns unanswered, wins the Super Bowl by 11 points after trailing by 10 points. And so we know how explosive this offense is. We saw what they did against Buffalo last week. They're down 9-0, and all of a sudden, over the next 2.5 quarters, they score 38 unanswered points against a great Buffalo team. That is a great Bills team, and Kansas City just dominated them. And I think at the end of the day, the key was, obviously, as I mentioned before, Todd Bowles called one of the greatest defensive Super Bowls ever. I mean, he didn't have to blitz either. He didn't even have to blitz. And you know, brought 4 guys. Pierre-Paul had a big night. Shaq Barrett had an unbelievable night, as did, Ndamukong Suh. Dominated up front. I thought at the end of the day, I thought Tampa Bay won the battle in the trenches. I thought offensively, they pushed Kansas City around. Leonard Fournette had some big holes to run through. Ali Marpet was amazing. But focusing on Tampa Bay's defense against Kansas City's offense. You guys saw the same thing I saw. Mahomes was running for his life out there. As a matter of fact, CBS, they track these next-gen stats. And Mahomes ran for a grand total of 500 yards. I mean, as soon as he takes a snap, there's a guy in his face. I don't care if you're Patrick Mahomes, if you're Brady. I don't care who you are. Every quarterback that's ever played the game of football is going to look bad if he's got a guy on one side and his right side, his left side, or both at the same time. I mean, he's running 25 yards backwards, just trying to make something happen because he had no time to throw. No question. I mean, man, Pat left his all out there, man. I mean, one throw, this would have been maybe the greatest throw in Super Bowl history, even though they got blown out. But Mahomes is looking for somewhere to throw. He gets grabbed by the legs. His body is in the air, and he still like sidearm slings it. I think it was to Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek just straight up dropped it. And so, listen, Pat Mahomes is the absolute last guy to blame for that loss to Tampa Bay last night. At the end of the day, Kansas City missed both tackles clearly, especially the loss of Eric Fisher, the left tackle, to a torn Achilles, and we wished him the best in recovery. In the AFC Championship game, that was a massive loss for the Chiefs. You look at the fact that they could not run the ball to save their lives. You know, I talked about in some of the games this year, they were really good running the football. Well, last night, not at all. Clyde Edwards-Helaire struggled to get anything going. I think they missed Damian Williams, who I think will be back next year. But you look at across the board, I get 107 yards, but how many were meaningful? You know, and how many of those were from Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, it was just a situation where they could not generate any push up front in the running game, and they couldn't protect Patrick Mahomes. And it's just like I explained earlier, is Todd Bowles had a pick your poison situation. Do we play man and Tyreek Hill goes crazy on us, or do we play zone and Travis Kelce has 15 catches, which Kelce, ended up having 10 catches for 133 yards. So, he got his numbers in, but no meaningful plays. I thought he dropped a key third down. I think it was in the second quarter of that football game last night. But I think at the end of the day, we see what happens. And someone once said, I can't remember who I heard this from, but it's so true, is that a great offensive line is like the AC. You don't notice it when it's working, but boy, you notice it when it's not working. Nobody pays attention to the quote unquote big uglies up front, but man, are they important in the long run. And we saw that yesterday. I think Kansas City in at the end of the day, they're going to be back next year. Although we have seen, and I discussed this before the year started, the first topic for the Chiefs of this season, I said Super Bowl hangovers. And again, this was a weird year because of COVID, so they couldn't go out and party or enjoy being champions. Everybody, we were all stuck in our house, right, at the start of quarantine in March. But I talked about the Super Bowl hangover, and if anything, excluding Tom Brady, there's actually more of a Super Bowl hangover with the losers of the Super Bowl. Because listen, San Francisco had a lot of injuries this year, but San Francisco went like 6-10 this year. Okay, you look at last year, the LA Rams lost the Super Bowl. And the next year they came back, 9-7, missed the playoffs. Okay, you look at 2 years before that, because New England lost one in between, they came back and won the Super Bowl the next year. You look at the Atlanta Falcons. After they blew the 28-3 lead to New England, everybody's like, man, this hurts, but they're going to be back. And they were good. But they were a wild card team, and they lost to Philadelphia in the divisional round. You look at the Seattle Seahawks. After they inexplicably threw the ball on the 1-yard line on 2nd and goal, and Malcolm Butler made one of the greatest plays in NFL history. And Seattle, and everybody's like, okay, Seattle will be back. This is just a bump in the road. They'll be back. And Seattle went 10-6, good, but they were a wild card team, and they lost in the divisional round, and Seattle still has not been back to the Super Bowl since. So we see this pattern here of teams losing the Super Bowl, and they're never really quite the same. Now, again, Kansas City, I think, will be the exception. You got the best quarterback in the world, best offensive coach in the world, best tight end, fastest receiver, great receiving core. They've got their key guys on defense, Matthew and Jones, locked up long-term on big contracts, well-deserved. But I don't worry about the Chiefs long-term, but I go back to what I said about Andy Reid is, to me, the turning point in that game last night was Andy Reid. They kicked they kicked the field goal. It's 14-6 with under a minute left in the game. And you're thinking, okay, Tampa Bay's going to be aggressive, but they're not. They run the ball. And so clearly Bruce Arians is saying, look, we're good with going into the locker room up 14-6. And Kansas City is like, even though Kansas City gets the ball to start the second half, Andy Reid uses a timeout. And I'm like, I don't know. And this is not me second guessing this. I first guessed this on Twitter. And then the second play, they get 8 yards. And I'm like, man, there's no way Kansas City's going to use a timeout. And they did. If they had sacked Brady on second down and it's 3rd and 15, I get it. I totally agree with it. I would use a timeout too. But it's 3rd and 2. That's nothing. And of course, they convert the 3rd and 2. Kansas City basically gave them 2 free timeouts. And due to some penalties, undisciplined football, tripping Evans down the field, I get it was an inadvertent, but they're going to call that every time. Tampa Bay scores a touchdown right before the half to Antonio Brown with 6 seconds left, and that felt like kind of a nail in the coffin. But again, you've got Pat Mahomes, best quarterback in the planet. Andy Reid, who despite his deficiencies in I don't want to call him like a disciplinarian or anything like that. Like he needs to be, just like all over guys. But I think at the end of the day, the most disciplined team wins. I talked about in week 4. It was week 5. Sorry. It was week 5 and the Bucs played the Bears. And the Bucs had something like 13, 14 penalties and they were not good whatsoever against the Chicago Bears and they lost the game. And they said all week, Tampa Bay players, reporters that were close to the Bucs, they were saying, man, Brady is all over these guys. And everybody's, oh, Tom's being a little too harsh. He's being too mean. There's a difference in being mean and asking for accountability or demanding you be at your best. There's a very clear difference. It's the same thing with the last dance. Like, oh, Jordan was too mean to his team. No, he wasn't mean. He demanded excellence. He demanded you give your best at all times. He demanded that you play disciplined. And Tom Brady demanded that the Bucs play disciplined. And 1 week later against the Green Bay Packers, 1 penalty. That's Tom Brady. And last night, Bucs had 4 penalties and the Chiefs had 11. So look, he hasn't addressed it for almost 2 decades now. I don't know if he will at this point. And I'm talking about Andy Reid addressing the Chiefs committing stupid penalties, the offsides on the field goal, which led to the 14-3 lead on the very next play, Brady to Gronk. The Chiefs have some things to talk about, but listen, they're going to bring back the same roster next year. I still think that they're clearly the best team in the AFC. I don't think there's any worry about that. But clearly, Pat Mahomes played, and again, it was not his fault they lost the game, but he did play the worst game of his career. But credit to Tampa Bay's pass rush. They took advantage of the situation. They took advantage of the fact that, Kansas City was missing both tackles. And again, I know we say this every year, but I would not be shocked at all if we get the Super Bowl next year. I think it's in Los Angeles at the new SoFi Stadium, which is unbelievable. And surely by that point, we'll have a full stadium and a normal Super Bowl. Hopefully 2021 is the year of getting back to normal. We're all crossing our fingers about that. So let's get to somebody else shying away from football. Before I get my last topic, I'll get to Tom Brady. Let's talk about that halftime show, man. The Weeknd. And first of all, like I said at the beginning of the show, if we're going to talk about who were the big losers last night, obviously number 1 was the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost the Super Bowl, for crying out loud. But you know the second loser was last night? The Grammys. They look like, I'm not calling them idiots, but they look like idiots after last night. That was great. And I heard people, kind of complain, oh, it wasn't that good. Okay. And my response is this. Did it keep your attention? Yes. Okay. Did the Weeknd bring good energy? Well, yes, he did. Were there any controversies? We've seen many controversies. Obviously, the one with Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake. We've seen controversies in Super Bowl halftime shows. Were there any controversies last night? No. Was it, did the Weeknd, as he said in his press conference the other day, did he keep it PG? Yeah, it was family friendly. Did he perform his biggest hits? Yes. Was it entertaining, especially at the end? By the way, the sequence they were doing on the field, because obviously they started. I don't know if the Weeknd and his dance team was in the pirate ship on the top of Raymond James Stadium, but they eventually made their way down to the field. But the transition to Blinding Lights, which is an awesome song, by the way, the transition to Blinding Lights was dope. It was awesome. But again, the Grammys look terrible because they did not nominate this man, despite After Hours breaking all kinds of records, and having multiple hits from that album, Blinding Lights, Save Your Tears. I mean, it's a great album. And the fact they didn't even get any Grammy nominations is just ridiculous. But that's another story for another day. But I thought he was great last night. It was entertaining. I thought, I always love it when memes come out after a Super Bowl halftime show. It seems like we have that every year. I saw it when he did the I Can't Feel My Face, when he went inside the room with the gold lights. I mean, they're just everywhere, and the cameras just going everywhere. They said, I saw one meme that said like a 5-year-old when they get your phone, right? And so I thought it was great. I'm a fan of his music, and so maybe I'm a little biased, but I thought it was entertaining. I thought he brought unbelievable energy. Again, keep in mind, this is the same Super Bowl halftime show that 2 years ago, and no disrespect whatsoever to Maroon 5, but that was a blank show. And you know what I mean? I mean, that was bad. A year before that, Justin Timberlake, that was terrible. Last night, the Weeknd, props to you, man. That was. I thought that was an unbelievable show. And Grammys look pretty bad today. And a lot of times we see at Super Bowl halftime shows, they'll bring out secondary performers. Like that's normally that's what they do. Hey, he didn't need any secondary performers. He did what he had to do. Solo, I know there have been rumors like maybe Drake or Ariana Grande maybe show up. They didn't. The Weeknd didn't need anybody. He needed himself and some backup dancers with some masks on and red coats, and he was good. And of course, some unbelievable lights for the fireworks show at the end. Great halftime show, certainly entertaining, and yeah, that's all I got to say. I feel bad for whoever's got to follow that up next year. So, final topic of the day. I called today Blue Monday because this is yesterday. Of course, it's like Christmas for football fans, right? It's the Super Bowl. Two best teams in the NFL head to head for the Lombardi Trophy. Whole country's watching. Football fans, non-football fans, everybody's watching it, and we see scenarios. We haven't got some great Super Bowls, in the past. A few years ago, the Patriots played the Rams. That wasn't the best Super Bowl in the world. But for the most part, we get some great games. Last night wasn't a close game, but it was no doubt entertaining. But I call today Blue Monday because it's like, man, we got to wait another 7 months. And it is a long 7. I hate the wait between the Super Bowl and Week 1. And I know we get college football before that, but there's nothing like the NFL. I love college football, but not as much as the NFL. But let me go into detail about Tom Brady. I already talked about him. He won his 7th ring. He was great last night. That wasn't the best Super Bowl performance we've seen from Tom Brady, but he absolutely deserves Super Bowl MVP. He was efficient. He was accurate. I thought, I keep saying Kansas City. I thought Tampa Bay's offensive line did an amazing job protecting him last night. But what's interesting about this is, and we see this all the time. We don't see this every year. We only see this when Brady's in a Super Bowl. Is you look on social media after a big play. Oh, this game's rigged. This game's rigged. Officials, they're getting it for Tom Brady again. Because I guess maybe the tuck rule, which of course was a bad call back in 2002, I guess that rubbed people the wrong way, and I understand that. But come on now, this game was not rigged. Stop it. And so Tom Brady, it seemed like the masses in America hate him. And I'm here to tell you, you got no business hating this guy. And I'll tell you why. Because there's this perception. Maybe it's because he's good looking or he's married to Giselle. They live, great lives. They're rich. They're both successful. A beautiful family. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Here's why you have no business hating Tom Brady. First of all, he's been an underdog since the start. At Michigan, his freshman year, he was the seventh quarterback on the depth chart. His freshman year at Michigan. Okay, he goes on to have a really good career, not a great career, but a really good career at Michigan, which is obviously a storied program. He gets drafted in the NFL. Or before that, he's the scouting combine. That might have been the worst scouting combine of any individual player we've ever seen. And I mean, it's just bad. You need to YouTube it. It's awful. It might be the worst combine we've ever seen from one individual player of all time. And so he gets drafted 6th round, pick number 199. To back up, by the way, I think he was the 3rd string quarterback going into training camp. Obviously, Drew Bledsoe was the starter at the time. I can't remember the guy's name. I think he was the 3rd stringer going into his rookie year. Now, Tom did not play his rookie year. He started his first game in week 3 of the 2001 season. But he's doubted. He's the 6th round pick, 199th overall pick in the draft. He's counted out. At the end of that Super Bowl, his very first Super Bowl win against the St. Louis Rams, it's at the end of the game. It's tied at 17-17. There's like a minute left, and the Patriots are at their own 25. And John Madden, the great John Madden, says, I would just run the clock out, get this game to overtime, protect your young quarterback. And Tom Brady goes right down the field. Adam Vinatieri finishes the Super Bowl off with a game-winning field goal, and the Patriots win their first of eventually 6 Super Bowls over the next 2 decades. But John Madden, great as he is, he doubted Tom Brady. And then we fast forward 13 years too, because Brady wound up winning 2 more Super Bowls. He went to 2 more after that. But we go to 2014. Now, at this point, Brady is 37 years of age. And so at that time, 2014, it's a different time back then. We thought 37, 38, man, like that's it for a quarterback, at least as a starter. Because then once he gets closer to 40, he's more of a backup. And we saw what happened with Peyton Manning, the 3rd greatest quarterback ever, in my opinion. He went from throwing 40 touchdowns at age 38 to 9 touchdowns and 17 interceptions at the age of 39. He was awful his final year in Denver. He was carried by a great defense, obviously. And so New England's playing the Kansas City Chiefs, ironically. They're playing the Kansas City Chiefs on a Monday Night Football game in week 4. And it was a mess for the Patriots against Kansas City. Matter of fact, I'm trying to get the final score of that game just to show you how bad it really was. Tom Brady plays an awful game. I mean, he is terrible that night against Kansas City, and 14 for 23, 159 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks. It was bad, and the Chiefs won that game 41-14, and Tom Brady got benched for Jimmy Garoppolo, rookie Jimmy Garoppolo. And that day, everybody was like, that's it. Brady's done. So Tom goes back to being the underdog. He winds up winning the Super Bowl that season. 2016, over the next 2 years, really, Tom has to deal with Deflategate, which is the biggest bunch of baloney of a scandal as I've ever seen. I mean, if you compare the Houston Astros cheating scandal to this, it's not even close. The Deflategate was just a PR stunt. It was awful. And so Brady, after a 2-year battle with the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell, says, you know what? I'm just going to take the suspension. Let's just take the suspension, move on. Let's prove this guy wrong. Tom comes back, plays unbelievable over the next 12 games of the season. Patriots dominate Houston in the divisional round, dominate Pittsburgh in the AFC Championship game. They get to the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons, and we all know what happened. Brady throws a pick 6 at the end of the first half. Falcons are up 21-0. Okay. Atlanta in the second half, I think it was their second drive of the second half, go right down the field. Touchdown, Matt Ryan to Tevin Coleman. It's 28-3, and we're like, it's over. It's a good night. Everybody's about to shut down their Super Bowl parties until Tom Brady shows up and leads the Patriots back from 28-3 down to win that Super Bowl. So he was doubted then. He proved the doubters wrong. At age 40, he's done. Come on, that was just a fluke against Atlanta. At the age of 40, Tom Brady won the MVP and should have won the Super Bowl. He put up 33 points in that Super Bowl against the Philadelphia Eagles. So doubted again at the age of 40. Brady wins the MVP and comes within a fumble. He obviously got strip sacked by Brandon Graham at the end of that game. If that doesn't happen, I'm pretty confident he leads the Patriots down. They score a touchdown. They win that football game. Okay, age of 41, Tom's done. He's going to the AFC Championship game against a young Pat Mahomes. He's still young, but he was younger back then, of course, 2 years ago. And everybody's picking Kansas City. And the game goes to overtime, and Tom Brady converts not one, not two, but three 3rd-and-10 plays to keep that drive going. They wind up scoring a touchdown on that drive. Brady makes a key throw to Gronk. Key throws to Julian Edelman on that drive, that game-winning drive. I believe it was Rex Burkhead who punched it in from 1 yard out to win the game. And they go to the Super Bowl against the Rams. And Brady is playing terrible through 3 quarters. Now, the good news for the Patriots is it was only 3-3. It wasn't 28-3. And when they need him the most, Tom shows up clutch. Huge throw to Gronk down the left sideline. They score a touchdown, I think, on the next play. Sony Michel. They ride the momentum out for that game. Doubted again. Tom wins his 6th ring. And then last year, Brady does not play well at the end of the season. The Patriots go out in the first round in the wild card against the Tennessee Titans, the 6th seed, the last team to get in the playoffs. The 6th seed Tennessee Titans. New England goes down. And everybody, once again, making the mistake, dancing on the grave of Tom Brady. He's done. He's old. He looked bad at the end of the season. We don't see this from Tom Brady. Okay? He goes to Tampa Bay. People are like, oh, 7-9. Come on. 43 years old. Stop. Same division as Drew Brees. Same conference as Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. He's not. They're 7-5. They lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. It was their 2nd straight loss. It was their 3rd straight home loss. They did not lose a game the rest of the season. They won their last 3 against Atlanta, Detroit, they won their last 4. I apologize. Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit, Atlanta again. They go on the road to beat Washington, the number 2 ranked defense in the league. They go on the road and beat the Saints, who crushed them twice in the regular season and had the 4th ranked defense in the league. They go on the road against the MVP, Aaron Rodgers. And Brady wins that game at Lambeau Field, as well as that defense, which was amazing. And then they go up against the team a lot of people consider the best in the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs, the guy who all of us consider the best quarterback in the NFL, Pat Mahomes. And while Pat did not get any protection whatsoever and does not deserve, in my opinion, an ounce of blame for that loss last night, Tom, at the age of 43, outplays Patrick Mahomes and wins his 7th Super Bowl ring. Something I've learned about GOATs, I learned this with Michael Jordan when watching the Last Dance documentary, because, of course, I was not on this planet when Michael Jordan played. But something you learned in that Last Dance documentary that we've seen over and over and over and over with Tom Brady, you don't bet against this guy. You don't. If you do it at your own peril. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation. Because time and time again, his rookie, he comes in, he's a 6th-round pick. Guy, they don't even think he's going to make the team. Okay? 2 years later, they're in the Super Bowl. It's 17-17 with 1 minute left in the game. And the great John Madden, who's calling that game, says, just run the clock out. Don't put Tom Brady in harm's way. You could literally Google. I've watched that Super Bowl. It was a great Super Bowl between the Rams and Patriots. Greatest show on turf. Great Patriots defense. Amazing game. But John Madden said, just keep him out of harm's way. Don't play this conservatively. Get this game to overtime and win it there. And Tom goes, boop, 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 boop. Adam Vinatieri, field goal to win. Obviously, the clutchest kicker in NFL history. Adam Vinatieri, field goal, wins it. And so John Madden, Hall of Famer, bets against Brady. Brady goes down the field. Game-winning field goal to win his very first Super Bowl. 2014, 37 years old. gets crushed by Kansas City 41-14 and gets benched in that game he plays so bad. And people are like, come on, Brady's done. He winds up winning the Super Bowl that season. 2 years later, Deflategate, down 28-3 to the Atlanta Falcons, comes back and wins. A year later, 40 years old, he's done. I mean, he's 40. Come on. MVP, came that close to winning his second straight Super Bowl. A year later, come on, Tom's done. He's going to get crushed by Pat Mahomes. Game-winning drive, plays amazing in that game against the Chiefs. Outduels Mahomes, leads New England to the Super Bowl where he wins his sixth Super Bowl. And then finally, plays bad at the end of last year. Everybody's saying, again, he's done. Come on, he's 42. He goes to Tampa Bay. Everybody's thinking, oh, Tampa Bay's, come on, they're not going to do anything. And today, Tom Brady has his seventh ring. You can't put greatness into words. Don't even try to. But I've never understood why people hate Tom Brady. Again, is it the good looks? Is it the money? Is it the fact he's married to Giselle? I don't know. I don't know. But you can't dispute greatness. You certainly can't hate on it. Listen, guys, Pat Mahomes is amazing. And we're gonna have some amazing quarterbacks over the next, rest of our lives. But we're never gonna see anything like this. I mean, we may. It's a small possibility that happens. We are witnessing a quarterback at the age of 43 who's still a top 5 quarterback, who's still winning Super Bowls, who's still carving up defenses. You can't describe it. So congrats to Tom Brady. Congrats to Bruce Arians, the head coach. Congrats to Todd Bowles, who called an amazing game last night. Byron Leftwich called an unbelievable game last night offensively for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Congrats to that Bucs defense, who was amazing. Gronk, who has his 4th ring. And he and Tom Brady, as we speak, are probably in Disney World. I saw they made that commercial last night. We're going to Disney World, as the Super Bowl champions always do. And Kansas City, I believe they'll be back. But this is a day to celebrate the greatest quarterback ever, and in my opinion, the greatest American athlete in the history of team sports. Okay? Because you got Babe Ruth, didn't have the longevity of Brady, and they have the same amount of rings. And he didn't, by the way, Babe didn't have as many MVPs. You look at Michael Jordan, Brady has more rings. Jordan went to a second team, but didn't make the playoffs. Brady goes to a second team and wins the Super Bowl his first year. It's incredible. So that is all the time we have for today's show. The game was amazing. The halftime show was amazing. I thought Nance and Romo were great in the booth last night. I thought the pregame ceremonies were great. Postgame was great. That's how you close an NFL season. Of course, you'll wish it was a closer game. I understand that, but I don't. Outside of that, you couldn't ask for a better Super Bowl. So hope everybody has a great week. Catch us on Thursday, as always, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here, either on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter, and you can also follow me at Carving It Up Podcast on Instagram, at Carving It Up Pod on Twitter. If you're watching on Twitter right now, thank you very much. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Carving It Up with Bryson Carver. Facebook, it's just Bryson Carver. Search that. You should see the Carving It Up logo after looking at a few Bryson Carvers. So hope everybody has a great week. Please continue to stay safe. Congrats to the great Tom Brady. God bless all y'all, and peace out. Deuces.